Welcome everyone to another CTC software webinar. My name is Sean Zerbis. I am the Director of BIM Development here at CTC Software. And in today's session, we're going to talk a little bit about analytics available within the Nexus suite. We're going to go over a fairly comprehensive introduction here so you can see a bit about what is capable, what is possible within this analytics environment. Now, of course, as always, these webinars are recorded. And if you happen to be watching this on YouTube, we kind of hope that this video earns a like and that you decide that this is worth a subscription, but that you'll decide later. For those of you joining us live, we always watch the questions and answers window while we're talking live, and we encourage you to throw questions in there in the GoToWebinar system so that you can get your questions answered immediately when we're talking about that context. We also save a QA session for the end in case you want to hold your questions until then. But either way, feel free to interact. So let's talk about today's discussion. And here's the deal. Information is fantastic. I like information. I like having a lot of data at my fingertips, but really the importance here is the ability to navigate that information. Because if you can't navigate through it, it really doesn't do you a whole lot of good. Many of you have asked for easier access to custom analytics, and we've worked hard at CTC to help get that to you. And here today, I want to talk about analytics as a whole. We are going to talk a little bit about the new CTC Reporting API, and I'm even going to demonstrate a couple of different ways that you can use this at your firm to pretty much build whatever it is you want. Now, early on, I'm going to start with this comprehensive overview talking about some of the web-hosted default simplistic dashboards to get you some meaningful information to begin with. Then I'm going to jump in and use sort of an Excel and Power BI workflow to show you how you can get data and customize it. And then finally, I'm going to take you on a little bit of a tour of the full capabilities of the API, if you are interested in that aspect of it, talking about how you can do any kind of ETL workflow for yourself and load this into any storage solution of your choice internally for analytics. And so here today, because I'm going to be covering a lot of detail, I again encourage you to interact, get your questions answered so that you can really start to leverage this at your own firm. So without further ado, let's kind of jump in here and take a look at this. We're going to be going through a few things. Again, signing in and navigating stock dashboard reporting. This is the stuff that's available in the portal. We're going to talk about some downloads that you can get easy access to for Excel and Power BI and data set and some prerequisites you want to work with that. We're also going to talk a little bit about Web API connections, and we're going to take a look at the data set that you can leverage. And then we're just going to talk in general about some things you could do planning out your custom integration. So we're going to navigate through that API to talk about some of that. First things first, let's talk about stock reporting, because this is the easiest way to get into analytics and take a look that you have data in the first place that's available for you to start reviewing. So in order to work with the stock reports, you're going to be signing into the portal, and you're going to be looking at the enterprise accounts area. You can also take a look at cloud shared license data from the portal. There's a little bit of content management system kind of reporting that's there, and there's a fair bit of project activity log reporting that's there. And because I could describe each of these to you, that's great, but let's actually just go through and navigate what is available in the portal and show you how you get there. So I'm going to pull up a web browser here. I'm up on ctcsoftware.com. I'm just here on the home page right now, and what I'm going to do is hit this little person over here. I happen to already be logged in, so it's just going to bring me right to the dashboard page. But if I wasn't, it would ask me to log in securely with my CTC account. And this is the first important thing about analytics. The data that is stored here is your data, right? It's your company's data. So you do have to have an account. This data is logged to your organization. So when you sign in, you actually get to control a bit about the rights of who can kind of see some of this information even. Now, because I'm signed in as an admin here, I do have on the dashboard tab some navigation items here on the left-hand side. We're going to go through a few of these. If I expand out enterprise, there's actually a few things inside of here. There's accounts users and accounts groups. If I go to accounts users, I can see a list of all of my active users here. I can start to filter and organize based on like what their role is. So if I wanted to know who are all of my organization admins who directly have that role associated with their account, I can see all 6 of the org admins and some of their information that's been entered into their user account. I can also do something similar over here. I can search and filter this. I can, sort by and search by different properties. There's a few things you can do here. Down below, I can see a breakdown of what offices they're located to, right? So there's a few different things that we can work with this users reporting tab. On the groups tab, somewhat similar here. I can see total number of groups, total number of users associated to groups. I can search them. I can see what the group names are. If I start to highlight some of these, depending on which groups I'm picking on, I can see, that there are users in these groups. Some of my groups are empty just because I use them a lot for demonstrations. But, depending on which group it is I'm trying to work with, I can see, again, who's associated to the group, who's in there, what perhaps the roles are that are associated directly with that group. So I can just get a really quick overview of what's going on inside of my accounts groups. And one thing I do want to point out is that if you go up here to users and groups and you make changes, don't expect those changes to immediately appear in the accounts users and accounts groups. These reports are delayed by up to 60 minutes time, just so that it can stay performant and run quickly enough in this web environment. So there's a little bit of a delay sometimes when you make the change and when you see it take effect over here. So just understand that. And that's actually true for all of the reports aspects here, projects, CMS, cloud shared licensing. When things happen, there's sometimes up to an hour delay before this data is 100% accurate. And that's just so that as I'm clicking through here and just navigating, it's super fast to pull this because it's pulling from a cache. It's not live querying, potentially thousands of users. It just has a little data cache for what's needed up here. That's why it can run fast. Similar to what we're actually doing, honestly, in the customized side of things as well. I was talking also about the cloud shared licensing reporting. There's one tab here for the overview. This talks about information from the last 30 days in this case. It'll list out for me the top 5 used applications by hours, the number of hours spent using those tools. And in my case, you can see Ally and the CMS out of the Nexus suite. The project activity logger also out of the Nexus suite. Those are the top 3 used tools. And then Schedule Excel and Survey Template Manager out of 2 different suites internally here are the next 2, right? So you'll be able to see what your top X used apps are. You can also see a breakdown of your licenses. You can see time spent in products by hours by suite. You can see over here time spent in different apps by users. So I can actually begin to filter down some of this stuff if I would like to. And as I filter some of this down, like if I click on me, Sean Zerbis here, some of this data up here is going to update and change based on how much time I have been in those products or interacted with some of those things, right? So this data here is all interactive across these little reports. Now, in here as well, if you are using the Revit side of this for your project data, project analytics logging, there's project level reporting inside of here. There's a whole bunch of tabs for that. There's overview data talking about your largest models, and if you have deadline data posted inside your project, your logical projects, it'll tell you which ones are approaching deadlines, and top users in the firm by how much time they've been spending in project models and data logging, and what project hours specifically by logical project they're spending time in. There's summaries by project inside of here to see what the project models are and how much time has been spent in those project models. There's a lot of data that's available here just at your fingertips. Who's contributing to those projects and those individual models. There's summaries of models individually, so I can highlight specific models and understand some of the base data inside of there, links that exist inside of there, views breakdown, so a lot of data here, some breakdowns on performance for those models, for opens and saves, for warnings, file size changes. That information is all logged inside of this system, and it's interactive, so I can start to see information about like at which point in time on which day certain opens happened or save times happened. I can see all of that. You can also get some extra detailed information for discrete saves, understanding which computers specifically this was on, some computer spec information, and again, a breakdown of some of the data within that model. So there's a lot of information that is here at your fingertips. One that I like to use a lot in projects is model warnings. Just a quick, easy way to navigate to and quickly see for a project, for a model within that project, what the warnings are for that model, how many there are, element IDs that are affected, and I can make some really quick informed decisions about actions as a BIM manager maybe that I should take, or a project manager or model manager that I should take if this model is performing poorly. You can also see some breakdowns of individual users of where they've spent their time in which models, in which actual projects and models. You can see a breakdown of views by model if you're tracking that data. So I can understand how much time each user is spending in particular views. We have some customers who leverage this to understand how much time people spend doing detailing inside of projects separate from modeling. There's a lot you can do there. So it's just a quick little rundown of some stock reporting that's available in the projects area. And the final one that I'm going to cover here is the CMS, the Content Management System. So if you are using the Nexus CMS, you have the ability to do some quick level reporting here as well. There's an overview of how many total libraries and total content, total file size and gig that's processed into the system, how many users you have by role inside of the actual CMS, and favorites that users have tagged by the user themselves. You can see some general search statistics inside of here. Who's searching what and when? What are some popular search terms? How many total searches? One thing that I like to understand is searches that have had 0 results. And in my case, in the past 30 days, this is a 30-day report here, 35 unique searches have had 0 results. And I actually have the ability to dig in a bit to those as well. I can see who had searches with 0 results, and I can see some of the base properties that relate to those searches. I can get in and dig in a little bit to some of the details about those. I can see some of the library permissions that exist. So library by library, I can see who has been invited to my specific libraries, who has admin level rights, who externally is given rights to things. You can also, well, this one here doesn't actually work just yet. So that one says working on it. That report is coming soon. This is one that does work in the custom reporting. You can see a breakdown of your tagging. This is one that I've begun to leverage very heavily lately, actually really using tags a whole lot more. And I can see for my tags how much content has been assigned to it and how many times those tags were used in actual CMS searches. So I can see some base data about this, see which tags are the most common by use. There's quite a lot of information, again, available here. So there's a lot of data that's just available in a stock report. You don't have to do anything special for this data to just begin populating if you're using those different aspects of the environment. Of course, you're going to have users, so everybody's enterprise accounts users and accounts groups will have some data. If you're using any tools from CTC, your CSL data with the new licensing model will all have data populated here as well. If you are using the Nexus suite directly, the CMS and the projects data, if you're using different aspects of that, will have data for you to actually begin to browse. And so you can quickly see, do I have information that's available here? So this is just, again, online stock reporting. Today, I'm not talking about how to set those things up. This is just looking at what kind of data is available, and you can freely get access to those reports, especially if you're an admin. So let's talk about doing something more with this data, because there's more that can be done. So right now, we have available on the site an Excel file that actually can take the vast majority of the data that exists in our backend system, and you can pull that down. And there's a Power BI file that you can use to better navigate that bulk of your data. Let's take a look at a little bit what's going on inside of here. Now, first of all, before you do anything with the Excel and Power BI stuff, the easiest way to get access to this is to get the files from the portal dashboards area. There's actually a downloads there. So to get this, we were just looking at one of the buttons that gives you this. There's an API downloads little link right here. And there's 2 downloads that are available. One is the API data support package. This allows you the ability to get the Excel file and the Power BI file in a download. There is also a Postman collection, which we'll talk about in the next little segment here, that lets you better navigate all of what's available inside of here. But you can get both of these downloads if you have access to the Nexus suite. So go ahead and get those downloads right now if you'd like, and you can begin to look at a little bit of this information. So this is the part that I'm taking a look at right here, though, is the API data support package. You can download that. Now, along with that, and this is actually indicated on the portal as well, you will need to obtain a reporting API key. And you can get that from license request at ctcsoftware.com. So if you want to do reporting, you need to reach out to license request and say, hey, I need to get a reporting key for my company. Now, if one's already there, you just get it. If it's not there already, it will generate one and we'll just send it over to you. It doesn't cost anything to get a reporting API key. You do have to have the Nexus suite, at least there in trial form or free form. But once you do have the Nexus suite, you can get a reporting API key and these reports will just begin to work. Now, the way that this works is there's two files in there. There's an Excel file and there's a Power BI file. The Excel file holds the raw data extracted from the reporting API. So it goes up, it grabs all the data, it structures it, it stores it. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the workflow and what that actually means, but it basically is sort of like a flattened database. It contains a bunch of information. Next, the Power BI file, we use Microsoft Power BI. What this does is it generates an interactive report and it looks to the Excel file for the data. So in the past, I've had people ask me like, well, why don't you just have Microsoft Power BI look at the data directly and skip this whole Excel file thing? Well, I used to do that. I honestly did. I used to do that because it was the most straightforward, easiest way to do this. The problem is Microsoft Power BI is actually a pretty rubbish database. It's a terrible data storage solution. It's okay at translating some data and then turning it into a graphic report, but it's really bad at just storing bulk amounts of data. And the Power BI file was huge. And the refresh time it took Microsoft Power BI specifically to pull the data down and do the translate and then to load it into the reports, it took a very long time. I had some customers whose reports took like an hour and a half to refresh. That's unreasonable. I don't like that. That's not great. So what we did is we transitioned over to Excel holding the data. Most of us have Excel at our fingertips, and Excel can pull that data down much more efficiently. Reports that used to take me, the refreshes that used to take me about 45 minutes to an hour now take about 60 seconds. So the reason why we do this workflow here is just pure performance. When I want to refresh, I don't want to wait an hour to get my data. I want it fast. So we're going to go through a little example here of how we can leverage Excel and Power BI to work with this data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up here a little folder on my desktop. Give me just a second here as I do this. Just making a folder and throwing some data into it. Oops, did that wrong. Paste, there we go. Okay, so I've got these two files. These are the two files you get with the download. There's actually a little instructions sheet there as well. I am going to be opening up this Excel file right here. Double click on this to open Excel. And we are going to take a look at updating some of the settings here really quickly. Now within here, this is telling me that I do need to enable content. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, enable content here. And actually, this already has some data in it, and I want to show you the exact thing that you're going to get because I accidentally saved this just before our webinar today. So we're going to come back. I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to go ahead and pull across here some files from my default directory. Let's go open file location here. We're going to copy these two things across. Here we go. Copy here. All right, so this is default, okay? Nothing's in here yet. I'm going to open up this Excel file, this XLS file, and it's going to be empty. It has nothing in here other than just some like placeholder data rows. And with this, step one in this workflow is to enter your API key that you'll have to have acquired from license request at ctcsoftware.com. So I'm going to go to Data, Queries and Connections. This is going to pull up a large queries window over here to the right with all kinds of information that's basically populating all of these tabs, this flattened out database in my Excel file. I'm going to collapse the primary queries over here, and I'm going to edit this report API key. This key here is used by all of my reports to be able to fetch data from the web API. So I'm going to edit this by simply double clicking on it. It pulls up Microsoft's Power Query Editor in Excel, and I'm going to be filling out my report key here. Now I believe I have this copied into memory. Let's see here. Yeah, there it is. Okay, there's my report key is sitting right here. And I'm going to, there's some other settings, by the way, that you can change here. So this will change how fast the data loads. There is some true-false statements here that ask you what kind of information you want to get. Now, if you aren't using the CMS, or if you aren't using the project activity logger, then you may want to not fetch those tables. And by default in this file, those are set to false. It's set to get account tables, true, and it's set to get the cloud shared licensing tables, true, because everybody can leverage that if you're using CTC's system. But if you are leveraging the content management system and or if you are leveraging the project activity logger, then you may very well want these to be true as well. So you simply click to that little field and you change the value from false to true. And I'll do the same thing here for get PAL tables. I'm going to modify this and set that to true. If you do care about things like the details of the content, you can set this to true. I will say this takes a lot longer to load because it has a lot more information. Every single piece of content and every file and every type and parameter value that can be associated to it, you can pull all of that from the portal if you want to and get a ton of extra information. There's also some search details here. You can understand a lot more about what users are doing with searches. This one I am going to pull. So I'm going to set that to true. You also have one other very important setting here, and that is the date offset. So our web portal does 30 days, and you can't customize that. This search date offset here, you can set this to go as far back as half a year, 180 days. So that's what, 6 months. So you can set this to go back 6 months if you'd like to by default inside of here. You technically can pull further back, but this system isn't really able to store that much data. Excel isn't capable of that. So we'll talk more about custom pulling of data a little later on. So once you've modified some of these settings here, and you can get real granular if you want to. There's an includes table which talks about specific types of data and specific tabs where you can set the values true and false for those as well. If you want to know more about that, reach out to us. I'd be more than happy to walk you through some of the deeper customization. But the high level stuff here is simple true falses just from a parameter value. You simply modify it. And then when you're done, you click close and load. And this will save these settings to the Power Query system. It's probably going to pop me a message here in a minute. I guess it won't. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and save this file. And now what I'm going to do is a refresh. I'm going to tell this to refresh all of the data. Now this, because I'm in a webinar right now, I'm in a presentation, it's probably going to take a little bit longer. It'll probably take about 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes to do the actual data refresh right now. So I'm going to let this cook for a minute. But now what I'm going to do with this background window is I'm going to edit this Power BI file, because once this finishes and once I save it, I'm going to be able to immediately pull that data into the Power BI file. But what I need to do in the Power BI file specifically is tell it where this Excel file is located, because it's just looking to it. And since it's on my local computer here, I'm just going to use Shift right click, and I'm going to copy the path, copy as path, there it is right there, copy as path. I'm going to copy the path of the Excel file. That'll get the full path. If I was to click up here, see users, me, my desktop, webinar folder, it's going to know the full path, including the file name. And I need that for this Power BI file to do what it needs to do. So I'm going to open this up. Now this is using Microsoft's Power BI desktop. Mine's probably about a year or two old, but any of the newer versions can open up this Power BI X file. So I'm going to be opening this up in Power BI. I'm going to maximize this on screen. And there's one parameter that you need to change here. And it's actually easier to change parameters in Power BI. You simply go to Transform Data and you click Edit Parameters. You don't have to go into the actual data source settings page like you do in Excel. I don't know why Excel doesn't have this edit parameters option, but it doesn't. So for the Excel file path here, I'm going to select the entire thing, and I'm going to replace it with the new path that's on my desktop. I am going to remove the quotation marks, the opening and closing quotation marks, because this just wants the path for the entire Excel file. I have tried making this a relative path. Power BI does not support relative paths. I looked, it doesn't do it, at least not my version, so I have to put the full path. That's why you have to copy paste this. But this is a one-time thing. Once you've done that and you save your Power BI file, it wants to know if I want to actually apply my query. I'm going to apply this a little later on, once I know that that Excel file is complete. Once I save this, the next time that I open it up, I don't have to do any of that monkeying around with the transform data edit parameters because that's already been saved. All I have to do is hit refresh, and it will refresh all of the data inside of here. And what it does is it takes all of those tabs from the Excel file and it loads them in directly. It has a little bit of relationships between those tabs, so it kind of converts it a little bit back into a bit of a database, but it's a very lightweight database. It's just the data and a little bit of relationships. And then I can use that data across all of my different reports inside of here to view a whole lot more about that information that's in the Excel file. So let's go take a look real quick. Looks like the Excel file has finished while I was talking about the Power BI side. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save here. This is going to save the Excel file. That was way faster, by the way. In previous editions, if you've seen this type of presentation from me before, or if you have tried this yourself with just the Power BI file and you're pulling all kinds of data, that probably you're still waiting for data to refresh. And my Excel file has already refreshed it, which is nice and powerful there. Jumping back into the Power BI environment, I'm simply going to tell it to refresh, and it's going to refresh all of my data from that Excel file. This doesn't take very long because it's just pulling from a local data set. In fact, it's loading the data into the model already. It should have, yeah, it's a 380 some meg file, really small, really fast. I can save this, and now I have all of the data from the Excel file ready to go. Very easy, nice and lightweight. So now if I want to dig into my users, this is the same kind of data that I had in the portal, though it's laid out a little bit different. But I have basically the same data, and I can live filter this kind of information here as well, right? This makes it really easy to kind of navigate through and see this information. I have accounts groups. Again, same kind of information, but if I want to know who's in what group, what kind of roles perhaps that group might have, I can see that information. I can cross-filter. Maybe I want to know all of the groups that have some kind of like CMS admin level role. Looks like there's only one. Maybe I want to know all the groups that have support admin. Again, looks like there's only one given how I set my system up. But you can very quickly go through and manage and see all this information that's available to you simply refreshing. So here in the CSL overview, Cloud Shared Licensing overview, you can actually filter out some things. So one of the things that I know many of you don't necessarily like is, of course, the Nexus suite is going to have the most usage. It's expected to be open all the time here. Ally has 901 hours in the past 30 days. My CMS has 691 hours. It dwarfs all of the other tools, right? So if I wanted to, I can simply turn off the Nexus suite for this tab in this report. And now I'm seeing the top X, actually it's top 10 used applications, even though I said top 5. It's the top 10 used applications from all the rest of my suites. And I can start seeing things like, oh yeah, Schedule Excel or Survey Template Manager. That's got 20 hours of use in the past 30 days, right? I can see what that is. And if I care to know more, I can say, well, who in my company was using Schedule Excel? And I can see an exact use of who it was, filtered down nicely, how much time each person spent in that tool doing things. If it was just a simple refresh on Project Open, or if they're actually making changes, I can sort of derive that here from the product usage. And I'm seeing the total usage overall in a particular suite from that particular tool, right? Spreadsheet Link, I can see again who's using this, or Survey Template Manager, who's leveraging this. I can see all of this information very, very quickly and navigate and customize this for your own needs, right? There's filters over here that you can manipulate. You can modify all the visualizations. That's the power of, well, Power BI, because you have the ability to go in there and heavily customize all of this if you want to. That's fantastic, in my opinion. The content management system has a bunch of extra data. Here I have things like my family standards reviews from previous family standards checks if there's stuff in the last 30 days. In my case, there isn't a lot here right now, or actually, I guess it's limited down to December of last year. That's fine. I can see my search statistics and I can filter through those, right? All of this data is available at your fingertips. The tagging of stuff, what's tagged. I could even change that up and see what content is tagged by what. All of your PAL data here is very similar to what's in that cloud reporting there, but I can start seeing a ton of data here at my fingertips for particular models and seeing the breakdown and customizing this for my own nefarious purposes, whatever that might be, right? See a bunch of data. I've blocked out the computer information here, sync to central performance, warning summaries, PAL user summaries for who's in what model and how much time they're spending in specific views. If you want to know Revit version data, all of that is here, right? This information is very powerful. PAL data, CMS data. There's other data you can get access to that I haven't even talked about here because I just built out a couple of tabs, but you can customize this all day long with very little effort, okay? Now, sometimes I know that a few of you might have some issues when you're trying to refresh the Excel file. When you hit refresh all, you might get an error or two that pop up. There's a few things you're going to want to make sure that you do. First off, at the very top of the Excel file, when you first open it up, before it is a, quote, trusted file, you're probably going to get a little warning or a message up here that it wants you to enable external content, because this is actually running queries to an external web API. And Excel has some minor protections against that, and you will need to enable that. If that is not enabled, then the refresh will not function. Another issue that may cause you some problems, depending on your corporate defaults here, if I edit any of these queries, it doesn't matter which one I edit any of these queries, within the query editor, the Power Query Editor space, underneath File, underneath Options and Settings, and Query Options, here, I've discovered recently that for the privacy settings in the query options, you need to ignore privacy levels, and this sometimes improves performance, but ignore the privacy levels for the data refresh here on these tables. Now, I can tell you these are all safe. Of course, you have to make sure you trust that, but ignoring the privacy levels that are stored within whatever Microsoft Excel or Office as a whole wants to set, these query refreshes will ignore those and actually let the queries fully refresh. So that's going to be important. Before you can actually refresh the data, you'll probably need to set this option right here. Okay, once that's set and you save it and you do a refresh, that'll probably work. If for some reason it's still not refreshing, I encourage you to reach out to technical support or tech support at CTC Software. We're more than happy to help you troubleshoot why your data isn't refreshing, but it sure should be at that point. Okay, the final thing for today is I want to talk about more advanced reporting and usage, because there's more that you can do beyond just this Excel thing. Like, the Excel side is cool, and many of you might be like, hey, this is good enough for me. I can start building custom stuff in Power BI. You've done a lot of legwork, and I've done a lot of the legwork here so that you don't have to do all the back-end data pull just to get data into Power BI. But some of you want to go further, and that's fantastic. I fully encourage you to go further. To go further, though, there's some more advanced things you're going to want to do. You're going to want to get the raw data set from the portal. It's the dashboard downloads once again. And in there is a Postman collection set that allows you to dig into all of the data structure. You'll be able to much more deeply understand what kind of data is getting returned from each of the different web API endpoints that are available. You can then take this data, do your own whatever method your choice is. You can extract and translate and load this data into whatever system you want. You can go through the ETL workflow. E stands for extract data. T stands for translate that data into whatever kind of structure format seems to make sense for you, for your system and your needs. And then you load that data into whatever other system or into whatever database makes the most sense. So a lot of the times the extract and the translate is done with code, like Python or maybe Dynamo or whatever. In my case, I'm using Power Query to extract and translate that data. And then I'm using Power Query as well to load that data into Excel spreadsheets so it's visible. And then I also use Power BI to load the data from Excel into its environment so I can just simply use it. Okay. So to do this, again, you're going to go to the portal. We were here already. And on the API downloads, one of the downloads I pointed out was that CTC Postman collection. So you can get that. You can get Postman itself. You just sign up for a free account from https://x.com/get-postman, and it'll just build you a Postman account. With that, you can download this little resource collection, and give me a second here as I pull up a new web browser, and I'm going to pull forward here. I'll pull this across, pull it across to this window. Here we go. I'm in a different browser entirely on purpose. I keep my development side separate from my typical browsing side. I have a little Postman collection set up here where I have the accounts, the CMS, the cloud shared licensing, and the PAL data all just stacked up right here. And I have a little environment set up. And you will need to take that little environment, in this case, the CTC API environment, and put your reporting key in here. You still need a reporting key because this still needs to get you your data. So when you put that in there and you save this reporting key once you paste it into the current value column here, then when you're in collections over here, if you wanted to see stuff like how do users get pulled? There's 4 different calls here in total. There's get users, there's get groups, there's get invited users. You can actually find out who's been invited from outside firms to your org and your organization, and you can use that. You can get a list of the valid roles. This is all just get requests, very simple get requests. Within the get users, it'll show you up here the exact paths and all of the options that you can use when you're getting those users. Now, one thing that I personally almost always forget to do, but is required here, is I have to tell it which environment I'm using that holds the right parameter values for me. So I'm choosing the CTC API environment here. And with this, if I wanted to leverage that and get the first page here, page 1 of 1,000 users, 1,000 is the maximum page size, I can tell it whether or not I want to include the roles these users have. I can tell it how to sort it, and if I want that ascending or descending. You can also disable any of these if you really want to. I would recommend including page size in the reports key, but you can choose to exclude anything here you don't want to get. If I send this is going to send out to the web API this exact URL right here. It's going to fetch a bunch of data, and in my case, I only have 64 total users in my organization, and it gives me then those 64 items with a record for each individual item, telling me the email, the display name, first and last name, the status, all the information that's available in the back-end system, who last updated it, when it was updated, what roles this person has by role ID, right? That 900 maybe doesn't mean anything to you right now, but if you go get role values by organization right here, this will tell you what all those roles actually mean, right? So it's going to help you get data for all of the individual different people that exist here. My test user is in here as well, right? There's a lot of people, test, like a bunch of test users apparently in this system. Some of them have no roles, right? The roles are empty. Some of them have specific roles. A lot of my reports are very similar to this. Now, if you are a company who has more than 1,000 of a certain record, you may have to figure out what the total number of items are so that you can figure out how many pages of 1,000 do you need to get. Do I need to go to page 2, page 3, page 4, and continue to ask for more data from each of those pages? Go for it. Get all your data. Pull it down into whatever extra system. That's the extract part. Taking this data here and structuring it into a way that makes sense is that translate step. Translating this structure here, this is a JSON data object. You're going to take this data here, you're going to restructure it so that it fits well with your storage method. In my case, I translated it to fit into Excel. And then I loaded that data. I actually injected that data into Excel. I did that load. Now, if you want to see some examples of this, when you get that Excel file, you'll actually be able to go into the queries that are running, that are asking for the data, that are doing what we call recursive searching, where it cycles through and grabs all of the individual pages of data. That's important, especially for those of you leveraging things like the cloud, the CMS, the content management system, and the project activity logger, or for that matter, even cloud shared licensing. There's going to be more than 1,000 results per page for things being used. In my case, if I say, get me all the content, I can ask for that. And if I send this request, it says, cool, I gave you 1,000 objects, but there's 9,005 objects in here. This means I got the first 1,000, great, but now I have to go do this 9 more times page by page to get the next page. My very last page, page 10, because I have to get 9,000, 8,000 to 9,000, and then finally I'm going to get the last page, page 10 there. That last page is only going to have 5 items on it. That's okay, but I can get all of those individual, distinct, unique items, right? So this page should be pretty small. Yeah, just 5 items on this particular page because it got me the last page 10, which is 9,000 to 10,000, which is only going to have 5 items. But you're going to go through and get each of those pages. Y'all can use this for whatever it is you want. Whatever it is you need to get out of this system, you can go fetch. There's all kinds of information on content by ID. There is loads of data for a particular piece of content. There is loads of data for a particular project or particular doc session where you can get all kinds of information about that. There's loads of data about the products that you own from CTC that you can get to understand how your team is using it and where maybe there's underused tools that you want them to use. Find out who on your team is using them well and find out what works for them, right? And then find out how you can train the rest of your team to get even more productivity out of these tools you're paying for. That's the purpose of these reports, is so you can make better decisions and help improve your workflows overall. So this data gets you there. That's the purpose of this. There's a lot of data, and there's, the Excel file to start you down that path, but there's also this web API that you can use to pull even more information if you want. Okay, so there's a few additional resources that I want to point out for you. I'm going to summarize a bunch of things here at the end, and then I'm going to jump into the questions window for anything that I wasn't able to answer while I was, talking through, because I see a couple of questions. And by the way, start queuing up your questions as well if you have additional questions to ask here, because I'm going to spend some time in the QA window answering those. But first here, additional resources. One more time, you need to get a reporting key for this to work. If you just download the files that I talked about and you don't have a report key, none of this is going to work for you. So you got to get a reporting key, and you get that once again from license request at ctcsoftware.com. You also need to be able to sign on to the CTC portal. So for those of you who maybe haven't committed to getting Nexus and getting a portal account yet, go get that. This helps you get all kinds of data. You probably already have a portal sign on anyway, and you're going to go to the portal and get these downloads from ctcsoftware.com/portal, or you can just navigate there. Another really meaningful spot that I think you should be visiting, if you aren't already, is our YouTube channel. We have a ton of playlists and some that go really, really deep. There was I think it was a 4 or 6, actually it was like a 8-part series on the reporting API that really starts to dig deep into these individual areas. Leverage that, use those resources, but also don't feel like you can't reach out to us. Feel free, reach out to CTC directly if you need to know more about this and you've got more questions. The best place to reach out for that, again, is techsupport@ctcsoftware.com. So for those of you watching this on YouTube, I'm going to say thank you. We always appreciate when you take a look at these. We do, again, hope you found this valuable. We hope that this helps you better leverage the CTC reporting system and really give you a deep dive into what is possible, what is capable. Certainly leave comments there. We hope, again, we earned a like or a subscribe from you on that.